Welcome, guys. We are on day 10. I can finally do this. Push up. Well, I don't know why I said push up. I hate push ups. I don't know how to do push ups. I can't do a single push ups. Okay, moving on. If you see me leaning to this side, it's because I'm trying to put the verses here. I realize if I wear color here, it's kind of hard to see. Hopefully that works. I would want to give it more space, but then you see all the laundry on my floor. Okay, TMI. You don't need to know that I do laundry. Actually, you do, because I'm clean. I do laundry. That is completely irrelevant to this video. Okay, here we go. Day 10. Back on track. Thank you for joining us. Let's dive in. I believe that God has a word for us today. Here we go. The title for today is The Heart of Worship. We live in a world that it's a never say die, never give up, never give in kind of world. The words surrender and submission are negative. They have a bad connotation. They're related to losing, giving up essentially to something evil or something cruel, right? Something that has power over you. Not good words, surrender and submission. But we Christians know that surrender is at the center of worship. Basically, it is the heart, there it is, of worship. We surrender to God not just out of fear or duty even, but above all, out of love, right? The Bible tells us that He first loved us. And so, you know how like in a relationship when two people love each other, there is this element of giving in to people, right? And there's all these jokes about like, oh yeah, you got sucked in, or oh that's it, you're gone, you are in it deep. And so there is this giving into each other kind of element, and it's the same here. The analogy relates in a sense with God. When we offer ourselves to God, that's what worship is all about. Romans 12:1 says, therefore I urge you brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, right, and the mercy He has given us, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. This verse relates, connects sacrifice with worship, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a bit. It's basically a trust relationship with our Creator. We love Him so completely that all of our hopes and dreams are just wrapped up in God and who He is and what He has for our lives. Rick Warren says that in this relationship, there's 3 barriers that block our total surrender to God. The first one, fear. The second one, pride, and the third one, confusion. We're going to talk in depth about these. So the first one, fear. Fear comes from the fact that we don't realize how much God actually loves us. In a human relationship, if we're afraid that we love the other person more than they love us, we put up our walls, right? Because we don't want to give away too much of ourselves. In pride, in this barrier again that we're talking about, we want control of our lives. I'm not going to relate it. I'm not going to do the analogy of two people in love kind of thing. This one is simply where we have to come to a point that we realize that God is God and we are not, right? There's this humility that enters, and we talked about that in past lessons. Third, confusion. We misunderstand the meaning of surrender. There's that negative connotation that we carry, and so we carry it into our relationship with God. And we're going to talk a lot more about that in the end. So the first question that comes up is, well, can I trust God, right? The fear factor that keeps us from surrendering, right? That's where that plays in. Can I trust God? The Bible says in 1 John 4:18, it says, there is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. When we are not afraid of a relationship, we really just let go and be free, right? That's how we are with our best friends, with the people that we love, our family. When we're not safe, when we don't feel that we can be free, there's this fear of being made fun of, right? That's like a form of punishment. We fear, there's numerous things that we can fear in a relationship. We hold back. We don't say the things we mean because, what if they take it the wrong way and I don't know how to explain it? Or, we hold back of ourselves. And so here, we have to just realize that God loves us infinitely more than we can possibly imagine. The Bible is very, very clear about this in multiple places. In Romans 5:8, it says, "But God demonstrated his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, God died for us." God loved us even before we even thought of him as an object of love. I mean, even before we were created, he loved us. He knew us in his mind. He gave his life to save us from the curse that was placed on our lives as humans. So, I mean, think about it. Would you give your life for a person you barely know? I mean, as it is, we struggle enough with our siblings, right? Like, oh God, no, not for you. You're so annoying, right? But, I mean, how about your enemies? Definitely not. But Christ did, right? He, more than died for them, he loved them. And that was his motivation for giving his life up for them. This is the kind of relationship that God calls us into. We can feel safe in giving ourselves to him because he is a God with that kind of heart, right? He's the God of the universe and he wants the best for us. Why wouldn't we want to surrender our lives to him? And not only giving our lives to him in that way, but the freedom that brings, the freedom that there is a hair. So sorry. It was super annoying me. Okay. The question was, back on track. The question was, why wouldn't we want to surrender our lives to that kind of God, that kind of freedom versus, and not this fake freedom that the world brings that, YOLO, do whatever you want, and then afterwards you have to suffer the consequences. I mean, real freedom, right? Real freedom. The second thing, is having to come to a place where we are able to admit our limitations, right? This is the pride factor that I was talking about. You basically, you gotta kick pride to the curb. Humans have a hard time in admitting that we are created creatures and not in charge of everything. We're just not. It is the oldest temptation, right? You will be like God. And so Eve just, I was gonna say apple, but we don't know what kind of fruit it was. It was a fruit though. So in modern terms, right, you can say, you are master of your own destiny. No, you are not. There are so many factors that play into that. Yes, there's strength of human will. God has given us that gift, but ultimately, you are not in charge. A.W. Tozer said, "The reason why many are still troubled, still seeking, still making little forward progress is because they haven't yet come to the end of themselves. We're still trying to give orders and interfering with God's work within us. You are not God, and you will never be God. God is stronger. God is smarter. God is just bigger. He's richer. He's beautifuler. That is not a word you cannot say that I ever said that word. He's more beautiful than anything. You simply don't have the knowledge to keep the universe running. You just don't. And if you keep trying to be God, you will end up in the same situation that Lucifer found himself in. A place without beauty, without light, without life, because God is all of these things. And without God, you cannot have these things. You can be fooled that you have them. And while we're still on this earth, while we're still giving grace, while we're still under God's Son, you have a measure of these. But ultimately, we will get to a place where we are just like Lucifer, in a place all by yourself, with yourself, without the one who gives us the awesome things that make life awesome, right? It's a hoax, I guess you can say. So then what does it mean to surrender? And this is where we get to the third barrier, this confusion barrier. Surrendering isn't a negative thing. He isn't a dictator waiting for you to bow. Yes, your majesty. We've established that, right? He is a God of love and of kindness, and he's ever looking out for you. On the flip side though, surrendering to this beautiful God, it doesn't give us the excuse to just lay in a hammock and call it a day. Well, it is what it is, and I can't change it. It isn't accepting the status quo, right, as is. It's actually the exact opposite. It's giving your life away to something bigger than yourself in order to change what needs to be changed. Right? Have you ever met someone that is just so selfless, right? They're like, they're just like, you look at them and you're like, man, they have like the biggest heart, and they help people, and they're just kind, and they're just beautiful on the inside, right? Like, if they win the lottery, they wouldn't spend it on like Ferraris and the Bahamas, you know what I mean? They would probably give it to like some natural disaster relief fund, or hungry children somewhere in the world, or homeless puppies, right? Okay, that's extra, but I mean, you get it, right? Our life surrender to God is kind of like that. I mean, maybe not like the homeless puppies part, but I mean, still, you're gonna have kindness in your heart. If puppies are your thing, yeah, puppies are your thing. But it's basically when we give of ourselves, right? We just surrender, right? To change the things that God wants to change, to fix those things that he wants to fix, regardless of the cost that it means to ourselves. Jesus prayed in Mark. He was saying, Abba, Father, all things are possible for you. Take this cup away from me. He was in agony. He was suffering. But he surrendered to that. And he said, yet not what I want, but what you want. He was crying to God, God, this is gonna hurt. This is hurting, right? But if this is what's best, then do it through me. I mean, what strength, right? God wanted to fix the human problem of sin and selfishness and pride and self-sufficiency, and he had a plan, and Jesus was willing to suffer, to put his life in just complete suffering and ultimately death, right? Human death, to make right what God wanted to make right. I mean, that is the ultimate example of surrender and even in the midst of suffering. That's commitment. I mean, imagine, would you be able to make that sacrifice? I mean, I thank God that I wasn't placed in that position, because God knows Jesus was strong enough and he gave himself. And so we look at his example and we go, okay, that's the kind of life. I mean, that's a high standard. And on our own, we would never be able to reach that standard. But with God, we can. Surrender, it's just a fact. It's best demonstrated in obedience and trust, right? And that's a real relationship when you connect with another being, right? And you're able to give up your rights to this ultimate being in obedience, in trust. That takes humility, that takes commitment, that takes a perspective that you can see beyond yourself into the bigger picture, right? In a human relationship, like I said, it's an analogy. It only goes so far. Take it to the ridiculous and it just doesn't fit. So what we see in the natural world is a mirror of what exists in the spiritual world. But because we are flawed, it goes only to a certain extent. So obviously you're not going to give yourself and just completely disappear in another person, because the other person is also flawed. But when we're talking about God, yes, there is a level of should be a complete level of release and surrender to the ultimate being of perfection, and who really just wants the best for you. And he knows what the best is for you. Okay, the first thing that we have to learn is that there is blessing in surrender. Job 22 says, submit to God and you will have peace. then things will go well for you. Another version says agree with God. Another version says reconnect or reconcile with God. So first, you will have peace in this surrender. That's a plus. Second, you will experience true freedom. Romans 6:17 says, thank God, once you were slaves to sin, but now you wholeheartedly obey this teaching we have given to you. Here's a paradox that a lot of in American culture, in American society, we just don't understand. Victory comes through surrender. When you surrender to God, you don't have to fear or surrender to anything else, right? A person who doesn't have discipline to wake up every morning, right? It's a duty. It's something that you have to get through. Wake up every morning to go to work will always be a bondage to poverty, right? And a lot of the times we kind of think, well, if I'm just free to do whatever and whatever, I will just be happy. The fact is, this life is made up of hardships that bring freedom. That's just a fact. It isn't just all peaches and cream and clouds and strawberries and yogurt, and I'm hungry, I think. It isn't just what you want and everything just kind of happens. There is the natural flow of life will teach you there is sacrifice, and in that sacrifice there is freedom that you are allotted. That's just the laws of the universe. And the same thing in a relationship with God. There is freedom when we learn surrender, when we learn how to do the hard things that God is asking us to do, and even go through some suffering. There is freedoms that come, unspeakable joys, unspeakable just a commitment to love. It's hard. Let's go back to that analogy of a relationship. It's hard to stay in a marriage. It's hard to fight through it some days, but there is freedom. There is security in knowing that someone is there and they're loving you no matter what, right? That you made a commitment, and some people see marriage as, oh, you're tying me down and I'm stuck forever. But the fact is, when you look at an old couple and you're like, oh, goals, right? Like, I want that. That took sacrifice. That took hardship, and it fits so perfectly. In this, what's the word I'm looking for? It fits so perfectly in this situation that I'm bringing up to you. There is victory with surrender. Mary, the mother of Jesus, said, "I am the Lord's servant. Do with me what you will." Joshua, in the battle of Jericho, he fell on his face in worship. He surrendered his battle plans to God, and God gave him the city. William Booth, the founder of the Salvation Army, says, "The measure of a man's power is in the measure of his surrender." There is this balance between the victory and the surrender that you're willing to give God. That is just a heavenly truth, right? So give yourself completely to God. James 4:7 says, "Submit yourselves then to God." Humble yourself to God is another version. Get rid of your pride, right? The second thing to learn now then is that it is the best way to live. Everyone eventually submits to something or someone, whether it's a person, a relationship, a guilty pleasure, an ideology, a way of living, because we were just designed to worship. That's how we function. That's how we were made. You're like, oh, not me. No, yes, you too. We will eventually bow down to something. If it isn't God, it's going to be an idol. It's going to be fake. It's going to be temporary, right? It's going to be an illusion, whatever you want to call it, right? But it will be an idol, even if that idol is ourselves. You might say, well, I live for myself. I'm okay with who I am. I don't need God. Then you will forever be seeking to make yourself happy, like a dog chasing his own tail in circles. Your happiness will be your God. Weird, huh? That even your happiness isn't the best that there is out there. I'm sorry. But only that which is eternal will last. Only that which is eternal. And God is eternal. And he's asking you, come with me, worship me, be with me. And you're like, well, be submitted to something or someone, like, that just doesn't make sense. The fact is, again, like I said, he knows what's best, and he is best for you. He is the God who created everything. He is life, he is light, he is love, he is everything that our human heart desires. He's it. And so he says, come to me, right? Don't be satisfied with what you got here. Come to me. I got the best. C.S. Lewis, and I don't have the direct quote for this, but it just kind of popped into my mind. He says, and this is my paraphrase, we are too easily satisfied. We are satisfied in rolling around in the mud when God has an ocean for us to swim in. And so what you think is top notch, right? I'm seeking after love. I'm seeking after happiness. All of these things come with God. So he says, come to me. Seems logical, right? But we're satisfied with what comes from him and not him himself, right? We're missing the big part of it, right? Look, if I'm wrong about this, right, then and it all just comes to nothing, and you're fine into just dying and disappearing, and just there's nothing eternal, and this is it, then both of us will just go into this great abyss, having lived the lives that we thought was best, right? But if I'm right, you lose big time. That's the difference. And this life of surrender, it isn't easy. I won't sugarcoat it. It actually is really counterintuitive. It's everything that we think, but like just flip it, right? Everything that we think is natural and this is how things flow, flip it. That's the kingdom of God. It's God's way of living, God's standard of living here on earth. And a lot of times to us it just doesn't seem like it fits, but when God really opens your eyes and you see it, you're just like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. And that is my desire for every one of us, to have our eyes open, right? So that we can see this truth that is staring at you in the face, right? There is so much love and joy and happiness and good things in this life that we really desire. But that's not the end of all. That is what comes from God. What we really want is God himself. And that's what he created us for. And look, when you surrender things into God's hands, nothing under the control of God can ever be out of control. So if you are struggling with ideas that say, well, God can't love me, so I'm just not going to love him, I'm not going to worry about that, get that out of your head. He loves you, right? He is thinking about you and he wants you. And whatever it is in your life that is there, that is blocking, or he can handle. He's big enough, like I said. He is strong enough. And through him, so can you. So surrender, I dare you, and see what happens. And I'll leave you with this thought. Paul said, Philippians 4:13 says, for I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength. Look, no matter what situation you're in, if you put your trust in God, put him first, see if he won't put you through it. He won't help you through it. Put yourself aside and put God first. Romans 6:13 says, so use your whole body as an instrument to do what is right for the glory of God. What area in your life are you holding back from God? And my encouragement to you today is surrender. That's all I got for you guys today. I hope that was a blessing. Think about that. Live it. I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.